On the morning of May 13, 2024, employees at dozens of Red Lobster locations across America arrived for their shift and found the doors already locked. There had been no meeting, no warning email the week before, just a handwritten sign taped to the glass, closed, effective immediately. Inside, the lobster tanks sat empty. Chairs were stacked on tables that would never be bussed again. At some locations, the kitchen equipment, the booths, even the ship wheel decorations on the walls were tagged for a liquidation auction days later, sold off in a parking lot to strangers who had never worked a single shift there. 6 days after that morning, the company filed for bankruptcy. The story everyone already knows is the shrimp. In 2023, Red Lobster made its endless shrimp promotion a permanent item on the menu for $20, and so many people ordered it that the company lost $11 million in a single quarter. It is a good story. It has a punchline. It is also not the real reason Red Lobster collapsed. What almost nobody noticed is that the same company selling Red Lobster its shrimp also owned a piece of Red Lobster itself. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why that single overlooked fact, quietly put in place nearly a decade before those doors were locked, made a chain that once served hundreds of millions of meals a year almost impossible to save. The story starts in Lakeland, Florida, in January 1968, inland, nowhere near an ocean. Bill Darden and his partner Charlie Woodsby opened a seafood restaurant there on purpose, to prove that people would drive out of their way for lobster even without a coastline in sight. They were right. Within 2 years, the small chain caught the attention of General Mills, which bought it outright in 1970, when it was still only 5 restaurants. Under General Mills, and later as its own public company, Red Lobster grew fast through the 1970s and 1980s, spreading into towns that had never had a proper sit-down seafood option before, becoming, for millions of American families, the one place you went for a special occasion dinner without needing a passport or a plane ticket to the coast. In 1991, the kitchen started serving a simple garlic cheese biscuit as a side dish. Customers loved it so much, the company gave it an official name in 1996, Cheddar Bay Biscuits, and it became the single most recognizable thing about the brand, more famous, in the end, than the lobster on the sign. By its financial peak in 2013, Red Lobster was not a struggling nostalgia chain. It was the largest full-service seafood restaurant company in North America, with 705 locations across the United States and Canada, and close to $2.6 billion in annual sales. The company would later say that at its height, roughly 1 in every 5 lobster tails sold anywhere in North America came out of a Red Lobster kitchen. It had survived the 1970s, the 1980s, 2 recessions, and decades of changing American tastes, mostly by staying exactly what it had always been, an affordable, familiar, slightly ceremonial place to take the family for a special dinner. That consistency was the whole business model, and it worked for longer than almost any casual dining brand in the country. There was a version of Red Lobster in nearly every mid-sized American city, usually near a highway exit, usually with the same red roof and the same nautical rope trim, so recognizable that people could describe the inside of a Red Lobster they had never personally visited. But by 2013, that same consistency had become a warning sign. Sales per restaurant had been sliding for years, while newer, faster casual dining chains pulled younger customers away. Red Lobster's parent company, Darden Restaurants, which also owned Olive Garden, looked at the numbers and made a decision that had nothing to do with seafood and everything to do with what Wall Street wanted to see on a balance sheet. Red Lobster, the company decided, needed to go. On July 28, 2014, Darden sold Red Lobster outright to a private equity firm called Golden Gate Capital for $2.1 billion. On paper, it looked like any other corporate sale. Underneath it, something else was happening. To help pay for the deal, Golden Gate immediately sold the land and buildings under roughly 500 Red Lobster restaurants to a real estate company for about $1.5 billion. Red Lobster did not just lose ownership of its restaurants that day. It lost ownership of the ground they stood on. In exchange, Red Lobster signed 25-year leases to rent back the exact same buildings it used to own, with the rent automatically climbing 2% every single year, whether the restaurant chain was thriving or barely surviving. By the time bankruptcy documents were made public a decade later, that single decision was costing the company more than $190 million a year just to keep the lights on in buildings it once held free and clear. Red Lobster now had to sell the same amount of shrimp and biscuits as before, except every year it kept less of the money for itself. The restaurant chain had effectively become a tenant inside its own history. 2 years later, in 2016, a second and quieter deal reshaped the company again, and this is the part almost nobody connects to what came after. Red Lobster had bought its seafood, including its shrimp, from a Thai company called Thai Union Group since the 1990s. In October 2016, Thai Union stopped being just a supplier. It paid $575 million for a direct 25% stake in Red Lobster, plus preferred shares that could convert into nearly half the company within 10 years. Read that again slowly. The company selling Red Lobster its shrimp was now also an owner of Red Lobster. For an ordinary supplier, a bad contract is a problem for the restaurant chain to solve. For an owner who is also the supplier, a generous supplier contract is not only a cost, it is a way to move money out of the restaurant and into their own pocket before anyone downstairs even sees a profit or loss statement. The restaurant's food costs stopped being purely a problem to fix. They became, for one side of the table, a quiet second revenue stream. Stack that next to the real estate deal from 2 years earlier, and the shape of the whole company changes. Red Lobster now had 2 silent claims sitting on top of it before a single dollar of restaurant profit was counted, rent that rose automatically every year, and a shrimp supplier that was also collecting equity value from the very same purchases. Whether the restaurants themselves made money for their own operators was, for those 2 arrangements, almost beside the point. This is the part of the story most people skip past to get to the shrimp jokes. So if you want to understand exactly how it broke, stay with me. Through the late 2010s, casual dining as a whole was under pressure. Delivery apps and faster casual chains were eating into the slow, sit-down dinner that Red Lobster had built its identity around, and food costs climbed across the entire restaurant industry after 2020. Any restaurant chain would have felt that squeeze. Red Lobster felt it while also paying rising rent on buildings it used to own and buying ingredients from a supplier that was, at the same time, one of its own owners. Other casual dining chains could cut costs, close a handful of weak locations, or renegotiate a lease when times got hard. Red Lobster had already signed away that flexibility a decade in advance, locked into rent increases it could not undo, and a supplier relationship it could not simply shop around, because shopping around meant negotiating against one of its own shareholders. Leadership kept changing in the middle of it. Kelly Valade became chief executive in 2021 and left for another chain, Denny's, within a year. Paul Kenny, who came out of the Thai Union side of the business, took over in 2022, and Thai Union's role in the company's day-to-day decisions grew alongside him. The company needed a way to bring customers back through the door without spending money it did not have. It reached for the one lever that had always worked before, a deal on shrimp. For years, Endless Shrimp had been a limited-time promotion, something Red Lobster ran a few weeks a year to fill empty tables during slow seasons. In 2023, the company made a different choice. It put the $20 Ultimate Endless Shrimp deal on the menu permanently. According to a lawsuit later filed by Red Lobster's creditors, staff inside the company objected to making the deal permanent before it happened, worried it would not hold up as a standing offer the way it worked, as an occasional treat. The lawsuit alleges they were overruled. The math turned out worse than anyone had planned for. More customers ordered the deal than the company expected, and at $20 a plate, the more people who took Red Lobster up on unlimited shrimp, the more money the company lost on every one of them. In the third quarter of 2023 alone, the promotion helped drive an operating loss of about $11 million. A fourth quarter loss of $12.5 million followed it. Red Lobster raised the price, first to $22, then to $25, trying to find a number where the deal stopped bleeding money. It never fully did. Combine that with a rent bill north of $190 million a year and a debt load left over from the 2014 sale, and there was no longer enough left over to cover it all. On May 13, 2024, dozens of locations went dark for good. 6 days later, on May 19th, Red Lobster Management and 14 related companies filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in Florida. A turnaround specialist named Jonathan Tebus had been brought in to run the company through the filing. This restructuring, he said in the company's own announcement, is the best path forward for Red Lobster. By September, a bankruptcy court had approved a plan handing control to a group of lenders led by Fortress Investment Group. Red Lobster walked out of bankruptcy in mid-September 2024, with roughly 544 restaurants left, down from its peak of 705. In 2026, Red Lobster's former creditors, owed roughly $295 million, filed a lawsuit in a Florida court against former Chief Executive Paul Kinney and against Thai Union Group itself. The lawsuit alleges Thai Union used its position as both supplier and owner to extract value from the chain through favorable contracts, and one filing reportedly described the endless shrimp decision, in the creditor's own words, as a car crash for the company. Thai Union has pushed back in its own legal filings, arguing that making the promotion permanent was not its idea. Nothing has been proven in court. Nobody has been found liable for anything. The case is still open. What is not in dispute is what happened to the restaurants themselves. Under new ownership, free of the old real estate and supply arrangement, Red Lobster brought in a new chief executive, Damola Adamolakun, only 35 years old when he took the job in August 2024. Roughly 500 restaurants are still serving Cheddar Bay biscuits across the country today. The brand survived. The specific structure that nearly killed it did not, because it could not survive its own weight. Red Lobster did not fail because Americans ate too much shrimp. It failed because, for almost a decade, the company was quietly built to pay 2 different bills before it ever got to keep a dollar of its own. One bill was rent, on buildings it used to own outright, climbing automatically whether business was good or not. The other bill was for shrimp, bought from a supplier that was also, at the very same time, collecting a share of whatever value sat inside the company. Neither arrangement is unusual on its own. Sale leasebacks happen across the restaurant industry, and suppliers become investors more often than diners realize. What made Red Lobster different was having both at once, wrapped around a business that also needed to stay cheap enough for families to keep walking through the door every week. When the customer-facing side of a company has to compete with the version of the company that exists purely on paper, in leases and supply contracts, the paper version tends to win, right up until there is nothing left underneath it to collect from. The lesson is not that private equity or supplier investment is automatically dishonest. It is that a restaurant chain, more than almost any other kind of business, survives on thin margins and constant reinvestment, and it cannot absorb 2 separate parties quietly taking a cut before the doors even open for the lunch shift. If you want to understand how a company can serve hundreds of millions of meals and still nearly disappear, this is the pattern to watch for. Not the headline promotion, but who is quietly getting paid underneath it. If that surprised you, there is more of this every week on this channel. Subscribe if you want to see which company falls apart next.